Buenas tardes, estamos de regreso. ¿Me escuchan bien? Bien, vamos a dar la bienvenida a este panel de lujo que hemos integrado. Como bien decía Mario, el top 10 de las organizaciones a nivel mundial, y donde compartiremos con ellos, o ellos nos compartirán, una visión global de la industria de la protección contra incendio en esta nueva realidad. Me gustaría saber, equipo, si ya están con nosotros los panelistas. Paris, Ray, Christian o Chris Dubai, John Gall y Carlos Moret.
Presente.
Carlos, ¿verdad?
Sí.
¿Me pueden confirmar, equipo?
Yes, can you please confirm if you are present, and if you can turn on your cameras, you'll have it either under the lower portion or in the right-hand side. I'm turning my camera on. Okay, very good. So if you can do the same.
This is Chris Dubay. I'm both on.
Okay. ¿Los ves, Víctor?
Carlos, acá confirman que ya están. Paris.
Hey, how you doing, Shane?
Yeah.
Chris?
Shane.
Hello, gentlemen.
Awkward
Shane.
sitting in my house with a jacket on, but that's okay.
Okay, I can hear you guys. Let me introduce this panel. I'm going to introduce Paris Stravinis.
Close enough.
Almost. Paris, I'm going to say in Spanish this version, and then Carlos started to speak in English. Paris es vicepresidente y miembro de la junta directiva de la International Fire Sprinkler, o mejor dicho ahora, International Fire Suppression Alliance. Participa activamente en comités de la Nfpa, de la ISC, y es Chief Executive Officer de FM Approvals. Bienvenido, welcome Paris. Ray es actualmente presidente de la National Fire Sprinkler Association, Nfca. Anteriormente fue instructor en la Academia Nacional de Bomberos y jefe de bomberos en el estado de California, de Carolina del Sur, perdón, quise decir. Y welcome, Ray. Christian Dubai es vicepresidente en jefe de códigos y estándares de la Nfpa. Tengo aquí un currículum muy largo, si me permiten omitirlo para entrar de lleno al tema. Y finalmente me falta John Gall, que es presidente de la Asociación Canadiense de Sprinklers en Canadá. Welcome, John. Y Carlos Moret, quien es expresidente de AMRASI y actualmente es presidente de la Red Latinoamericana de Protección contra Incendio. El tema que vamos a abordar hoy es una visión global de la industria de protección contra incendio en esta nueva realidad. Sean bienvenidos y Carlos, te cedo el micrófono para moderar el panel.
Sí, muy amable. Gracias, Víctor. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody that's joining through this medium. The world changed. Now we're closer, but with a little bit more dangers, which that's what we're going to be talking about today. By welcoming you, I want to put a little bit in perspective a bit of the history and what we represent. So I will mention each of the organizations we represent in order of foundation. That will give us a little bit of perspective. FM Global was founded 185 years ago. It's the largest industrial company in the world.
Insurance.
Insurance, yes. Insurance company in the world. With its counterpart, FM Global, have given a quality to the world, both specialized in loss prevention services, primarily to large corporations throughout the world in highly protected risk properties insurance markets sector. Nfpa, founded only 154 years ago. The National Fire Protection Association is an international non-profit organization devoted to eliminating death, injury, property, and economic loss due to fire, electrical, and related hazards. Most of the codes in the world have been based on Nfpa. Both organizations with worldwide offices, presence, and impact in our lives, in our everyday lives. NFSA, the National Fire Sprinkler Association, was founded in 115 years ago, brings together the most important fire protection companies in the United States and all the experience that the United States has in fire protection. Sprinkler was invented in 1850, 170 years ago in the United States. Obviously, United States has the most experience in the world. Then we have CASA, our Canadian association, which is celebrating this year 100 years, also brings together the most important fire protection companies in Canada and has given the opportunity to many young people with a lot of problems, drugs, and whatever, people with lots of problems, the way to develop an earning through apprenticeship programs. After a few years, they can earn up to 100,000 Canadian dollars per year. So that's the big impact they have. Representing together with us is, by my representation, the Latin American network, which is born in this event with the help of the International Fire Sprinkler Association and the union of our brother associations, ABSPK Brazil, founded 10 years ago in Brazil, AMRASI, CONAPSI, founded 7 years ago in Mexico, and RAS in Colombia, founded 5 years ago in Colombia, and the newly born Dominican Republic Association that was formed last year. Here we have the representation of all the America and of the world with all their experience. Together, these organizations, we add up close to 550 years of experience in fire protection, in the creation of standards, regulations, and approved products in the world. Let us understand that each technical sheet, each norm, standard was created after learning, experimenting, applying what the science community has contributed throughout the years, and mostly due to some great tragedy that hit the news and our lives. Together, making changes in each of the countries using all the past experience and through testing and implementations, new technologies, many others don't have to relive those tragedies. The great fires in Boston, San Francisco, the DuPont Plaza in Puerto Rico, MGM in Las Vegas, the Grenfell Tower, the Disco in Santa Maria, the National Museum in Rio de Janeiro, Notre Dame in Paris, and many, many more don't have to happen again. And we have to understand that more than 50% of today's fires, tragic fires, happen in Latin America. Nothing and no one will be safe or prevented if we do not learn from history and apply proven science and products that these organizations create. That is why we're in this panel today. Latin America Network comes with humility and not trying to reinvent the wheel, but to learn and listen to those who have already passed through tragedies and learn to prevent them and be successful to reduce the risk of fires, loss of life, property, and business interruption in our countries. So Shane, I would like to ask you, how is the National Fire Sprinkler Association face this pandemic impact, and what's your lessons learned?
Thank you, Carlos, and thank you for having us. Thank you to the staff, and thank you to your members and our colleagues here. It's good to present to you from our national headquarters. So COVID has certainly impacted our association. What we would have went from traveling 200 plus days a year to now very little. But the good thing is that we had the tools, the technology, and the talent with our team to survive through this. So I'm standing here at our headquarters presenting. Actually, I have our chair of the board, Kent Mazzaros, with us because we have a big meeting ourselves tomorrow, and our chair of our SAM Council, Bob Boussier, who's sitting here. So I do have an audience of people with me this evening. So the tools, technology, and the talent that we had allowed us to lead through this worldwide pandemic, and as well as a national state of emergency in our own country. So as things stop, we've seen a reduction as much as 70% in some parts of our country. And with that shutdown, certainly that impacts our industry. So we work through executive orders from governors in all 50 of our states. So our legal and labor relations department work through those executive orders with our members. And in the US, we are considered an essential service. So we worked through to make sure we could keep our members working and that we could keep supply chains open across state lines in our country. So those were early things that we did early on. We're glad to see that things have returned to somewhat of a normal state, if you will, in the US, with a lot of work returning, but we're down about 14% as we prepare to go into this meeting tomorrow. That's been the impact of our industry overall. We predicted as much with a recession plan, which our board was progressive enough to know that one was coming. So we had actually presented 2 budgets. The first time ever in my career had I presented 2 budgets, but that recession plan allowed us to lead through this. And we predicted as much as a 30% loss. So we come out favorable as we were working through the process, and that's been beneficial to us. We are continuing. We have 34 side-by-side demonstration trailers across this country. So as we prepare in partnership and to promote what Nfpa does with Fire Prevention Week, we are going to have a satellite media tour where we are going to broadcast live as we burn to show the demonstration of fire sprinklers. We are going to conduct a live satellite media tour that will broadcast across the entire country of the United States and show the effectiveness of fire sprinklers during that time. And we've also created a video to share with fire departments that they can use as they try to train and teach virtually the effectiveness of fire sprinklers. So we have been fortunate to participate in a lot of different events. We're leading many of those events to show the effectiveness of fire sprinklers. We just recently partnered with UL in a program for the counterfeit fire sprinklers and how to stop them into all of our countries. And certainly those folks leading that charge, we participated. But as we work with fire service groups, and we just come from meetings today with our own federal government with how to fund federal grant programs in our country. So we've managed to lead through these times. We expect that as we go into 2021, there will be some more downturn as a result of this. But with all those things, we're going to continue. Again, we have the tools, the technology, and the talent with our team to lead through these times. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Shane. Thank you, and we're glad that you have all these preventions and that it hasn't hit as much as we had expected. Now, John from CASA, congratulations for your 100-year foundation. How did the Canadian Automatic Association face the pandemic impact, and what were the lessons learned?
Yes, well, thank you again for having us here. We're happy to participate in this program. Similar to what Shane was saying, for the first 14 days when we realized back in March what we were up against, we worked 14 days straight, right through the weekends, to make sure that the sprinkler industry was designated an essential service. We did that in every province of Canada that we operate in. So we operate in all provinces except Quebec. And we also did it with the federal government. So because we wanted to address federal projects, there was some large, and still is some large infrastructure projects underway that involve fire sprinklers. We were successful at that, and we were deemed an essential service, which made a tremendous difference. And but we weren't without difficulties. We weren't without some downward numbers coming through. Keeping in mind that as we entered into 2020, we had projected 2020 to be the best year for field hours that our industry had ever seen. We were on par for that. We were up year over year, the last peak, over 7% into February. However, midway through March for Canada, and I think for most of North America, things started to change. Different countries, we know in Europe, they were already into it, but we saw it midway through March. So the end of March, it had turned around from +7 to -2. We went in for the second, so that was the end of the first quarter. By the second quarter, April, May, and June, it had gone down, but it started to come up again. We had gone down to about 9%, but we finished Q2 at 7%. And I'm happy to tell you today we're at 4.9%. The summer months were pretty good for us. Now, it wasn't just the essential service in terms of new construction. One of the things that we worked on, and it took about 6 to 8 more weeks, but we had to go and look at all the various jurisdictions. The provinces have a fire code that oversee every province, and then the fire code's enforced through the provincial fire marshal and various fire departments. Now, that fire code addresses existing buildings. So this was the market for inspection, test, and maintenance. And that was a little bit slow at the beginning, but we picked up quite nicely as we got into the summer, and we were starting to, actually, we caught up inspecting a lot more buildings. We were working longer days to catch up because of a couple of months missed. Now, one of the challenges that really we faced, though, as we did this, as you can imagine, when work gets bid, there's an expectation of the price from everything from steel and products, but we had to figure out how to price in all the safety protocols, how to price in the protective equipment, hand washing stations, who would provide this equipment. And if it was the contractor, which it turned out to be, got passed down to the sprinkler guy, we're the little guy on site, how would we price that? How would we recoup those costs? So one of the other things we did with the government is that we had to meet with the federal government to start changing the ability to open up contracts to allow our contractors to recover the costs of some of this equipment and safety protocols, efficiency of time, and so forth during what Shane said, state of emergency in Canada. We were successful at negotiating that ability. I'll comment a little later on how we arrived at it, but we opened that up, and that was time well spent with our federal government on how to open up construction contracts that otherwise would never be open. One of the things we found is that sometimes the loss or the cost of that protocols and the equipment could be as much as the total profit on the job. So it became a very important and difficult thing. Good news is, yes, we're working, keeping people employed, but are we going to make money at the end of the project? So that was a challenge. The other thing that we had to learn to do was to deliver both education and training. Training, we talk about apprentices and apprenticeship training, reading to journeyman, but also delivering education to our authorities having jurisdiction. That would be people, insurance industry, it would be fire service, it would be building officials, people of that nature. And we had to do it in what very quickly became a market where the municipal governments, the audience we address, had no money to spend on anything other than COVID-19 issues. So that proved to be a challenge, and we had to scramble. As I know, Shane, and across America, they've done it very successfully. We're still working through some of the hurdles on that, but we're delivering this education to the authorities having jurisdiction. We've delivered 3 since the summer, or since since July, and we plan 4 more for the rest of the year. So in a nutshell, Carlos, that's where we were with as we entered into this crazy time of a pandemic.
Yeah, it's been crazy for all of us, and we have been very adaptable and flexible, and I think we are all learning a lot. And however, I see that there's different impacts in different parts of the world, and definitely United States and Canada have had less impact. I think even less in Canada, from what I hear from my suppliers. You're even up in some areas. Anyway, the impact is based always in prevention. No, if you don't prevent the impact, if you don't plan ahead, then you'll have a problem. And based on that, we have the best fire protection system is sprinklers. The use of automatic fire sprinklers is the best proven solution in the world for universal use, with a proven efficiency and reliability of 99%. It is the leading solution that has been evolving for the last 170 years. The simplicity of the sprinkler is what makes it effective, so good for so many years. It remains the best universal technology to prevent fires. In 88% of the cases, only 2 sprinklers operate. This use of essential elements is in a construction for some countries that has been regulated. It's normal, like air conditioning or reinforcement for structures. But for other countries, especially in Latin America, it is not as much. So it's essential for us to understand what other countries are doing, and for the customers, the person that will be at risk, and the companies that are building a new facility, or any of the contractors or construction people, and especially the regulators and the government, to understand that this is important. So like COVID now, there's a lot of lessons taken that we can adapt to the fire protection industry. So Paris, I would like to ask you, how did FM Global Approval face the pandemic impact, and what were the lessons learned?
Well, thank you, Carlos, and thank you for the invitation. Thank you to Victor for organizing it, and to you, Carlos, for moderating. And it's a pleasure to be a member of this esteemed panel. Again, as you said, I work for FM Approvals, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of FM Global, the world's largest industrial and commercial property insurance company. Okay, let's get that right. I'll talk a little bit about our customers, manufacturers. I won't focus on the sprinkler industry, because I think both John and Shane did a tremendous job, and they have more insight than I would ever have. But what we've learned from our customers throughout the world is that they're very resilient, more so than sometimes they even thought themselves. And they overcame a lot of challenges, both in terms of manufacturing early in the pandemic, as well as challenges that they had with the supply chain. That's for the next. This is not the presentation I'm doing now. Victor, okay. So what we do basically is we talk to our customers constantly, and we've fundamentally tried to find indices throughout the world related to construction, because most of the stuff that we test and certify is either in commercial industrial facilities or oil and gas. As we speak, you can sort of look at two extremes. China is probably the only country that's back to pre-COVID-19 in terms of manufacturing and construction. Practically every other country is doing far better than they originally predicted. So if you talk to people back in March, April, even June, the outlook was very pessimistic. July, August, even now, they're far more optimistic. I'll give you an example. The American Institute of Architects puts out an ABI, which is the Architecture Billing Index. It's like the PMI, Purchasing Manufacturing Index, right? 50 is steady state, above 50 is a growing market, below 50 is a contracting, reducing market. Back in April, June, you're looking at the low 20s. The August is 49, okay? So I think things are improving, okay? It's still gonna be challenging, but things are really improving. The only challenge is the oil and gas industry, but that has nothing to do with the pandemic. That has to do with the price of oil. That's been very depressed for the last 5-6 years. So in terms of FM approvals, what do we learn? What do we do? Well, I can admit that like most other organizations, we had a lot of risk management plans in place to take care of hurricanes, even terrorism. But I don't think we ever thought of a pandemic. So when it hit, you have to remember that our corporate headquarters, as well as our labs, are in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, which are Northeast USA. And the Northeast USA was hit the hardest back in March, April, May. So on May 16, we decided that we were shutting down all of our labs and all of our offices worldwide. And our main focus and concern was the well-being of our employees and their families. So I think we're probably one of the few product testing and certification organizations that actually shut down labs for over 3 months. That put a tremendous burden on our customers worldwide, but I'm happy to tell you that they understood the reasoning that we had, and they were very supportive. And fundamentally, we also put a strain on the business, okay? Shutting down for that longer time. But we also took a decision that we would have no furloughs, no layoffs, and we wouldn't do anything that would negatively impact the well-being of our employees and their families. So I'm happy to let you know that we've had 0 COVID-19 incidents in the FM approvals family. Frankly, so if you look at where we are now, all of our offices are still closed. People are working from home. So Microsoft Teams and Zoom is the new reality. I'm an old timer, okay? And I never thought I would get used to talking to people through Zoom or Microsoft Teams, but I'm getting used to it. Maybe I won't go back to the office. Maybe this is not that bad, okay? The only offices that are open are Shanghai and Beijing for us. In mid-June, we opened up all of our labs, so they're fully operational now and working very hard with our customers. We've introduced things that I never thought we would do, such as remote testing. Either, a manufacturer remotely witnesses a test in our labs, or we remotely witness a test in the manufacturer's facilities. Remote sample procurement, where we have to actually procure samples throughout the world, and a lot of remote surveillance auditing. So stuff that I would never thought we would do, we've basically done with tremendous support from our customers. What does the future look like? Well, I suspect at some point, I'm hoping that we'll go back to normal, but it may be a new normal. I can tell you for a fact, and I told this to all of our staff, if and when we open our offices, people will be able to work from home at least 1 or 2 days, or maybe more a week. They've done a tremendous job. We'll maintain our labs open. We've got plans in place now to make sure that takes place. No, we're not gonna shut down the labs if a second, a third, or a fourth wave hits. I think we're going to have a lot of discussions with our customers in terms of remote witnessing, but we'll find a happy medium. I also think that when things calm down a bit more, organizations that accredit us, such as OSHA in the US, for example, or Standards Council of Canada in Canada, will require us to actually do physical surveillance audits again. So it'll be a new, safe, exciting, and productive world. And in closing, all I want to say is, on a personal note, I'm looking forward to traveling again. I'd much rather be in Mexico City having this discussion face to face, and then we could all go out and enjoy the Mexican culture, some good food, and some good tequila. So rain check for that.
Rain check for that, Paris, definitely. And thank you very much. And 185 years of experience, preparation, the learning brought you to a zero problem. That's,
well, let's put it this way. You said it earlier, Carlos. In 185 years, I suspect we've made all the mistakes anyone can make. The only good thing is we've learned, hopefully, from all of our mistakes. So the intent is not to tell someone how to do it, but to share the mistakes we've made and what we've learned.
And that's what we want here in this panel. That's what's the reason of this panel. And I'm pretty sure that, you know, everybody will learn different things. We have a new normal, and we're like the old people, no? We're starting to do things that we have never done before or happened to us before. Anyway, yeah. So talking about old but young, 124 years, Chris,
yes.
of experience. What actions did the National Fire Protection Association take to face the pandemic impact and continue contributing to the fire protection industry in the world?
That's a great question.
How the pandemic impacted your ecosystem that you very well do, because you know you're not sprinklers, you're the whole industry together representing the codes of the world. So how this pandemic affected you?
Thank you, Carlos, and thank you for having us here. And again, I'll echo what Paris said. It's an honor to be part of this event, so thank you. Over the last century, NFPA has earned a reputation globally for being the premier fire and life safety authority. But without question, our staff stepped up during the COVID to help reduce risk. We have received great feedback about our swift actions these past 6 months. Not only did we need to move the entire organization to a complete work environment, but as I think you will see, is we needed to double our efforts in support of the global fire protection and life safety industry. Every industry, every business and person has been impacted by COVID-19, and safety has been on everyone's minds. NFPA quickly mobilized to ensure that people in various safety roles and the public had the information they needed to help mitigate the impact and reduce risk. Our initial COVID response centered around NFPA 1600, Standard on Continuity, Emergency and Crisis Management. The 9/11 Commission recognized NFPA 1600 as our national preparedness standard. It's widely used by the public, not-for-profits, non-governmental, and private entities in times of crisis. Within the fire and life and electrical safety spaces, policymakers, enforcers, facility managers, and first responders all grappled with the reality that buildings under construction or underutilized create a set of challenges, and limited access to buildings and spaces threaten the ability to effectively conduct inspections, testing, and maintenance. To help those charged with protecting people and property, we created resources for facility managers, building owners, and code enforcement for closing buildings, for opening businesses, the use of tents, tackling inspections, ITM, emergency egress drills, ensuring that people with disabilities had access during the pandemic, fire doors in the fire code, reopening of schools and conducting fire drills, and providing tips for remote video inspections. We put out information related to emergency response, revising 911 or emergency dispatch and response policies to keep responders and the public safe from infection, and provided tips on how to manage infectious control in relation to PPE. And our Washington, D.C. staff worked with major fire organizations to reinforce the fact that fire, EMS, and law enforcement are essential employees on the front line of this pandemic and should be among the first to receive PPE, masks, gloves, and gowns, as well as additional funding to cover their all-hazard roles. We anticipated the demands that would come with hospital surges because we have worked with the healthcare administrators for years. The U.S. Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services require hospitals and others to develop maintenance requirements in accordance with NFPA 110, Standard for Emergency and Standby Power Systems, as well as the safety benchmarks identified in NFPA 99, Healthcare Facilities Code, and NFPA 101, the Life Safety Code. If I could have the next slide, please. Temporary hospitals needed to be constructed, so we generated real insights that covered the important life safety elements that needed to be implemented in the medical environment. I suspect that when our technical committees get back together, we are going to see more discussions about temporary hospitals, but the environment was not going to wait on the committee recommendations. So it was ultimately about us gathering and sharing relevant insights via NFPA channels so that people charged with moving forward in the interest of safety had the right information to do so. We issued public education messaging about hand sanitizers and electrical safety, while families are using more equipment and devices at home. We reminded audience that with restaurants closed, more people eating at home means more cooking at home. And NFPA research tells us that cooking is the leading cause of home fires and home fire injuries in the US. In fact, nearly a half of all US home fires are caused by cooking activities. So we reminded the public as they social distance to cook with caution. From fact sheets to white papers, podcasts, webinars, videos, blogs, press releases, media interviews, guest articles, and NFPA journal coverage, providing timely information and knowledge so that our wide range of stakeholders could navigate the new normal. All this timely content can be found on nfpa.org/coronavirus, and we will continue to add this to this page as new issues or opportunities for safety arise. So yes, the coronavirus challenged the building and life safety communities these past 6 months, but on many levels, it's been familiar territory for NFPA, given our association's long history of addressing new threats and emerging hazards. In general, these past 6 months have been less about big alterations for standards and more about responding to the needs very quickly as they arise. And I think those needs will get carried over as standards go back into their cycles. Could I have the next slide, please? With respect to the ecosystem, in many ways, COVID times have underscored that we must connect the dots on safety. Just as we've been saying for the better part of 2 years as we talk with groups around the world and communicate via different channels about the NFPA fire and life safety ecosystem. The fire and life safety ecosystem is comprised of 8 different interconnected components. If any of the elements are missing or broken, the ecosystem can collapse, often resulting in tragedies. Let me briefly explain. Safety begins and starts with government responsibility. Then the development and use of actual codes and standards, providing a diversity of insights, opinions, and backgrounds which only enhance the standards development process. We need to understand and use reference standards. Standards are actually a system of standards. Following one part without the other leaves a significant gap. There must be an investment in safety. This applies to research, so we keep up with new risks and new solutions. It also means prioritizing the decisions being made. We need a skilled workforce. Regardless of our role, we need to ensure that those that do the work have the right skills. We need code compliance. And effective code compliance does not begin and end at construction. It's an integral part throughout the life cycle of a building. We need to be prepared, and we need to protect emergency response, requiring ongoing support for their all-hazard role. And finally, we need an informed public. Everyone plays a role in their own safety. During COVID, we saw ecosystem successes, such as US lawmakers passing a bill to ensure families of first responders who die from or are injured by COVID are entitled to funds from the Public Safety Officers Benefit Program. This activity was grounded in safety and support for first responders. And then, as an example of an ecosystem failure, would be when Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte suggested cleaning face coverings that are worn to prevent the spread of COVID with gasoline or diesel fuel. A government spokesman later claimed that the president was just joking, but his remarks conflict with the ecosystem component that calls for educating the public about ways to reduce risk and the public taking ownership of their own safety. The ecosystem has been translated now into 8 languages and is being used often as the framework for forward-facing discussions. And I also suspect that as we emerge from COVID-19, authorities will look at the safety considerations these past months with the ecosystem in mind and determine the best practices for moving forward. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. The ecosystem makes everything very easy to understand. We are all interrelated. Needs cough from somebody can kill somebody else. It's the same way for fires. So exactly the same. Thank you very much, Chris. Excellent.
Thank you.
That's why I want to ask the following. How much is a life worth? There's a Mexican song that says, La vida no vale nada. Life is not worth anything. In some countries, it's worth nothing. In others, where it is really valued by the governments, by their people, because exactly what you said, no, what the leaders of the world say and do will impact everybody else. And the value of life is important. Where it's valued between $1 million and $8 million. In Latin American countries, less and less, because our currencies typically, our exchange rate is not the best, and they devaluate. No. However, we have to understand that for someone, each and everybody of each of us is the most valuable person in the world. For your father, for your mother, for your son, for your wife, for somebody, you are the most valuable person in the world. That is why it's very important to become aware, especially today, that it is more than evident with the pandemic that we understand how fragile we are and the value life has. Our actions or the lack of them will cause enormous consequences. As I mentioned, no, my cough or sneeze will kill somebody. We finally realize how interrelated we are all, and we are more conscious of the impacts that our actions make. Pandemic will pass, however, fires will not. And we know if we do not do anything to prevent them, how many of us have even a smoke detector or a fire extinguisher in our home that costs less than $100? How many of us live in a tall building that will be a death trap in the event of a fire? We have seen many, many times. The destruction caused by fire in the world is 1% of the gross domestic product. The cost of lives in the world is approximately 200,000 lives annually. So that's why I want to put perspective, no? And Shane, what will be the future of testing and certification products for an NFSA? What will be your recommendations for those countries that want to develop their own standards to test and certify their products? There are so many, there's pollution in the world. And, there's pollution, and the country that makes the worst pollution is China. And it also sends, it pollutes 25% of the world, no? And the population is not as big. But there is also, it also sends products that are not certified or doesn't qualify for an approved certified product. And they also send like 25% of products that are not compliant for fire protection. So Shane, what's your comment?
Well, naturally, we work with our manufacturers, and there's 4 manufacturer members in the US that we work with that sit on our board. So they work with FM approvals, and our AHJs here in the country try to watch for those. That's where we work with the Border Patrol agents and everything. Those are coming in, but we certainly lean on our friends at FM to do that for our products and our manufacturer members.
Great. Excellent. What about CASA, John? How will the new reality change the fire protection industry in Canada? For the point of view of business customer needs, do you think that we need the new trade agreement between US, Mexico, and Canada will bring opportunities to all of our countries?
Yeah, just to address the first part of your question, Carlos, and what's changing, what's coming. I alluded earlier, the cost of all these things. Chris talked about PPE, masks, gloves, hand washing stations, the time to set it up, refresh it each day. We've done a study and figured that that's about 7% of the estimated price of labor on a job. So if contractors aren't doing that, they're thrown off the job. But if they're not doing that and getting paid for it, they're going to lose money or make no profit. So really arriving at the price of these new protocols was important. But here's an interesting thing, what you were saying with respect to, the price of a life. Those of us who have gone up against home builders in Canada, I think across America too, have realized that they very much want to put a price on life, and sometimes, a life, so much money spent on saving a life is not worth it. I often turn around and ask them, do you mean your life or mine? And so a different perspective on whose life we're talking about. But really, what has started to become an interesting dialogue, keeping in mind that we've had more discussions, and I think Shane and his staff have too, with the federal government authorities than we've had in decades. We're finding that there's an understanding that if we're asking people to stay indoors, and then there are fires, horrific fires in residential high-rise buildings, which Canada has a fairly large inventory, albeit we've been sprinkling them for some 15 years or more, but we still have a large inventory of non-sprinklered residential buildings. So we've had an interesting discussion shifting to the need to look at retrofit of existing buildings. And we've had a lot of success. We've been able to kind of chart a course because we've retrofitted care homes for seniors. We've retrofitted a lot of schools, hospitals. A few decades ago, we began retrofitting hotels. So it's not that this is unknown to us, but we are being able to retrofit or look at the practicality of retrofitting buildings. One of the other realities that we have now is that we were used to training our apprentices, and again, we have about 4,000 field personnel. We've got about 700 apprentices in our system. We, as an industry, generally, we use some community colleges. We train them ourselves through a joint training and apprenticeship committees we've set up. But it's a challenge because we did not have in place a correspondence program. We had locales located right across Canada where we did in-class training, where there was a shop and hands-on training available to all of them. Now, we've had to quickly go to virtual training, so what you might call a type of a correspondence training, but we're also, through a series of shifts, bringing in the individual apprentices to work in shifts in the classrooms. This has been a challenge. It's not been an easy one to meet, but we're starting to deliver that, and we're a few months behind, but we hope to catch up by probably February of next year by not stopping for at Christmas time as usual and so forth. We're going to keep delivering the apprenticeship training. So this is very important because we were in a growth cycle in our industry. All our code work, all the things we've done, we learned a lot from NFSA, and over the years we've began to really expand our market. Now, you mentioned the USMCA. In Canada, we called it NAFTA. Some Canadians still call it NAFTA. And if we're around some Americans, we make sure we call it USMCA. But it actually, in terms of our labor force, we don't see it making much of a difference. Whilst we do depend on immigration, a great deal in Canada, we depend on immigration. We are what's called a compulsory trade. And that means everyone who touches a sprinkler system has to receive training. They has to be registered in the province they reside in or work in when they become an apprentice, and they have to they register with the government, the College of Universities, and through different ministries they report in and are followed and tracked through the career. So it's very difficult to say would people come in and start to help our problem with labor. It would be a real process, but we need immigration to do it. Where we see possibly USMCA is, and you kind of alluded to it with manufacturing and products. We're very careful in Canada, and fortunately our market is of a size that counterfeits have not been a huge problem. They've raised their head. Our staff, along with NFSA and the International Fire Sprinkler Association, are participating with a company like Amazon to make sure that we're not bringing inadvertently or bringing counterfeit products to the market. Huge challenge. But in terms of the legitimate approved products going into the new USMCA, we see that there's probably 80% of the products we've been using are already have components made in one part of North America or another. Sometimes they're assembled in Canada, sometimes they come shipped through the States, but it could have an impact there. But we are really emphasizing the robustness of checking the products we buy and trusting the suppliers. So like Shane said, we have within our board of directors, even though we're a trade association, primarily contracting in nature in our history, but we have representation from manufacturers on our board. And it really is imperative that our members trust who their suppliers are. And basically, if the price looks too good to be true, well, it probably is. It's not a product you want to get your hands on. Now, this change with USMCA, it's still pretty early days. We have to see what it'll do to benefit Canada. Very little in the construction industry, other than perhaps some building starts because of different industries putting up buildings. It may mean growth in our construction market as a whole, of which we participate in significantly. But I would say the takeaway really that we're seeing going forward is a real renowned kind of a reoccurring theme of looking at residential retrofit. And in some cases, we still have some ICI buildings, industrial, commercial, or institutional, that need sprinklered too.
Excellent. Thank you very much, John. We learn a lot from Canada, from the US, and from the world through Nfpa. And I think, if you are asking, I learned English when I was 12 in Canada. If I knew I had an apprenticeship that I will make $100,000, maybe I would have stayed in Canada. But anyway.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. Let's understand something. There is, again, a little bit of perspective. The approximate number of sprinklers installed every year in the world is 250 million, but only 2.5 million are installed in Latin America. What percent of the region that has 8% of the world population and produces 8% of the gross domestic product of the world? This solution has to be implemented. Latin American Caribbean has to be protected. High income economies, where 17% of the world population lives, account for almost 50% of the world gross domestic product, based on purchasing power. So there's a lot for us to learn in Latin America from these countries. The countries that use sprinklers do so because they achieve a significant reduction in damages when they are installed, and 70% of the fire of the damage will be reduced, or else 100% of the building will be completely lost if there's no sprinklers. Okay, so the decrease in number of deaths is significant. to be efficient at technology of the operation, it has to have obviously all the elements that require the water, the pump, the valves, and obviously a good design, a good a product that's certified, that has all the necessary requirements. So when it will operate, you'll make sure that it will operate. Let's remember that fire protection systems, like any other systems, needs to operate always. We cannot fail. Air conditioning, water, whatever you need can fail, but fire protection cannot fail. So we need products that are proven effectively to operate in the world. That's why Paris, since for your point of view, what will be the future of testing and certified products, especially in Latin America? What will be the recommendations for these countries that want to develop their own standards to test and certify these products and bend the wheel? I don't know.
Thank you. Thank you, Carlos. Okay, that's good, because this is the slide I wanted to talk about to put things in context, right? You mentioned, for example, that only 2.5 million sprinklers are installed in Latin America. You could go into a lot of highly developed economies in Europe, and they're not really installing a lot of fire protection, fire sprinkler systems, okay, as well. So the biggest challenge, I guess, before we even get to talking about product testing standards or design installation standards, one needs to be able to look at building codes. In other words, if the building code in a particular country does not have a requirement for a certain occupancy under certain conditions to install a sprinkler system, then you can do everything you want in terms of design and installation standards, product testing, inspection, maintenance testing. It doesn't make any difference. As Victor said earlier, I'm a vice chair of the International Fire Suppression Alliance. We changed our name, still IFSA. And we've got a great relationship with NFSA since the inception, as well as CASA recently. And the mission of IFSA is essentially to expand the use of fire suppression systems that are designed appropriately, installed appropriately, and use quality products. So as you said, that fire suppression system operates when it's needed and performs as it was intended. FM Global has another group which is called International Codes Group. And that group is active in some parts of the world, some countries, focusing primarily on building codes, nothing else, to basically get into the building code, the need under certain conditions to install a fire sprinkler system, okay? So I'm going to talk about product testing and certification, but I just want to put things in context, right? You need the building codes to make the requirement. You need design installation standards, such as Nfpa 13 or FM 8-9. You need product testing and certification to make sure that you have quality products. You need inspection testing and maintenance standards. Again, NFPA, FM has them. And last but not least, you need competent people to do all those things, okay? But for this particular thing, I'll focus on product testing and certification, and this is FM Approval's view of the world, okay? Just want to make sure. Next slide, please. Okay. Next slide. The other way. One more. Thank you. So, what's the future of product testing and certification? Okay. And the fundamental question is there a need to create a country-specific standard, right? And so, for this conversation, given that let's assume we're all in Mexico, right? Given we're talking about Mexico, let's talk about a sprinkler standard, just so that it's easier to have that conversation. Next slide, please. So, why test and certify any fire protection product, any product for that matter, or sprinklers? Well, for three reasons. A is to make sure that it works when it's needed and performs as it's intended to perform, to protect people and property. You must have quality of these products that make up all those systems. And the third component is you must have a scheme in the country that maintains or allows for fair competition between in-country as well amongst countries. In other words, do not increase or introduce barriers to trade. Next slide, please. So we have two challenges. Okay, one is standards, product testing standards. Now, there are international product testing standards for sprinklers. There's an ISO standard for sprinklers. There's an EN standard for sprinklers. Granted, both of them are not as current as the FMUL standards. In other words, not as high K factor. And then you have national company standards such as FM, UL, LPCB out of the UK, VDS out of Germany. Okay. So one of the challenges is if a country like Mexico decides to go down a path and looking at a product testing standard for sprinklers, they need to decide what exactly are they going to do. Are they going to adopt, are they going to create a brand new standard? Then you have a challenge of harmonizing technical requirements with standards that already exist. Are they going to adopt an international standard? Well, that standard is probably 5, 6, 7 years behind the state of the art. Or are they going to basically adopt one of the national or company standards? Next slide, please. The second challenge you have is regulation. And that goes back to giving a level of confidence to the regulators of Mexico that the products that are coming in are quality products, as well as making sure with the new US MCA that you don't create any additional barriers to trade. Okay, so there needs to be a harmonized regulatory environment between countries. Next slide, please. So why should a country, Mexico or any other country, create a new sprinkler standard? Well, you have to answer three fundamental questions. Is there a safety concern for people and property in the country with the sprinklers that are currently being used? Are existing international or national standards not technically adequate for sprinklers to be tested and certified? And if you do create a new standard, is that going to somehow increase the safety for people and better protect property? Is it going to create barriers to trade that do not currently exist? And last but not least, is it going to increase the cost to interest in their user community? So you need to be able to sort of objectively answer these three questions and decide which path you're going to take in terms of developing a standard. Next slide, please. Okay, this is an assumption on my part, okay? This is, from my point of view, the current state for sprinklers in Mexico. And we can debate this, okay? But I don't know that there is a safety or performance issue related to the product, the sprinkler itself. There is no Mexican product sprinkler standard that I know of for testing and certification. Major certification marks are accepted, FM, UL, VDS, LPCB. There are practically no imported sprinklers without certification mark from the above companies. In other words, there isn't a huge amount of Chinese low quality dollar sprinkler coming into Mexico because of tariffs and other stuff. There are no barriers to trade for manufacturers. Fundamentally, if you're looking at the sprinkler manufacturing world, the 4 biggest companies are North American.
Correct.
And there is no Mexican sprinkler manufacturer that I'm aware of, okay? So if that's the current state, next slide, please. So if we agree with the current state for sprinklers in Mexico, then what problem are we trying to solve by creating a standard? And the only thing I can think of is that somehow Mexico wants a more regulatory control of the products that are imported into the country. For example, yes, maybe now there isn't a big, huge influx of Chinese low quality sprinklers, but perhaps it will be in the future. So the question is, how do you create more regulatory control in terms of what's imported if you get away from the tariffs and things like that? So you have 4 options to look at. Option 1 is to do nothing. There's no safety or performance concern for sprinklers. Major marks are accepted, no barriers to trade for manufacturers, no increase in cost, but you have a challenge when it comes to regulatory control by Mexico. Next slide, please. Option 2 would be to develop a new Mexican sprinkler product testing standard. So who has the technical competency to participate in a product testing standard? It isn't people that design systems or install systems, right? People that test and certify products have a special expertise. In other words, when you design a sprinkler system and install a sprinkler system, your whole focus is how to design and install it, maintain it so it operates and it's effective. When you write a product testing standard, your whole focus is how can I make this thing fail so that a manufacturer can make improvements and make it more robust. So if you develop a new standard, how similar or different is going to be from existing standards? In other words, the standards that I'm talking about, ISO, EN, FM, UL, LPCP, VDS, we've made, as I said earlier, a lot of mistakes along the way. And, it is the state of the art. Is testing and certification performed in Mexico or elsewhere? In other words, if you do create a Mexican standard, what is the Mexican government and the regulators going to say? Are they going to say you must test to the Mexican standard in Mexico? And if they do that, I don't know of any labs in Mexico that can do large-scale fire testing. In fact, there are only 2 in the world. One is FM, the other one is UL. Who does the testing and certification in Mexico? What happens if product modifications are needed? In other words, if somebody tests a sprinkler in Mexico and they find out that a particular sprinkler that's been in industry for 15 years does not pass, let's say, a water distribution test and requires that manufacturer to make adjustments on the deflector, well, guess what? That manufacturer, if he has FM, UL, VDS, and LPCB, if he touches that deflector, he's going to have to come back to all 4 and reevaluate the sprinkler and retest it. The worst case that exists currently in the world is South Korea. There is one major sprinkler manufacturer in South Korea. So the South Korean government created a unique standard for South Korea that no sprinkler tested and certified by all their other organizations will pass the water distribution test for South Korea. So if you're a major manufacturer out of North America, you want to sell in South Korea, you have a little line on the side that makes a sprinkler that puts the South Korean deflector. What happens, we talked about that, right? So at the end of the day, what's the increase in cost to manufacturers and the end users? Because you may have more testing, you may have modification, certification costs, surveillance audits, and everything that goes with it. Next slide, please, option 3. Adopt an international or national standard. Which standard and how is it decided? They're all pretty much the same. Most of the test requirements should be the same. No need to retest unless there are country-specific conditions. To increase regulatory control by Mexico, you recognize test labs and certification bodies inside and outside Mexico. They have the technical expertise, testing capacity, capability, and experience to do it. No product modification, because if you adopt one of the sprinkler standards that we talked about, everybody's got to test and certify it. Maybe no additional surveillance audits. Overall, some increase in cost to manufacturers and end users, but not much. Option 4, last option. Oh, this is the big option. All right. Recognize international national standards by reference. That's what most of the world does. I mean, if you look at Nfpa 13, it says you shall use products that have been tested by a national recognized test laboratory, by OSHA. And you go to OSHA, and basically OSHA says, okay, which standard are you going to use to test the sprinkler? This is the standard. OSHA looks at the standard, says it's good. OSHA audits your technical expertise and capacity and capability. OSHA blesses you. That's it. So you recognize test labs and certification bodies inside and outside Mexico that have the expertise to do this. Okay? And the regulators fundamentally, basically what they do is they set up a scheme that says, these are the standards that I want you to be capable to test to, and they basically audit on an annual basis or a biannual basis and make sure that the organizations that they have on their list are capable to do it. That's what the USA does. That's what Canada does. That's what India does. That's what UAE does. That's what Singapore does. Okay. Fundamentally, that's what the European Union does with the CE mark. You can be, as long as you're blessed by the European Union, you're good. Same test requirements, no need to retest. As I said, government accredits and audit test labs and certification bodies, so you have regulatory control. Practically no modification of the product, no additional surveillance audits, because usually that product is tested and certified by at least one of the 4 big organizations that I mentioned earlier. In many cases, all 4 already. Practically no increase in cost to manufacturers and end users. Next slide, please. So in summary, if you're looking at developing a product testing standard for, let's say, sprinklers, the 2 challenges are, if you go down the path of developing a brand new one, you have challenges. If you adopt something, you have to harmonize requirements. And the next challenge is you have to be able to harmonize regulatory requirements between countries. In other words, a scheme like US has, Canada has, and all the other countries that I mentioned. Last slide, please. So if you sort of look at a summary, and I won't bore you with all these things, but if you look at the 5 questions, safety concerns, regulatory control, existing standards adequate, barriers to trade, increased cost to industry. If you look at the current state, there's no safety concern, there's limited regulatory control, existing standards are adequate. Barriers to trade, no. Increased cost industry, no. If you go all the way to the other extreme and you basically recognize standards by reference, in other words, regulatory control of test labs and certification bodies by Mexico, whether those are inside or outside, for the standards that they test to. You have no safety concerns. Yes, you have regulatory control. Existing standards are adequate because that's what the sprinklers are being tested to currently for the last 70 years. No barriers to trade, no increased cost to industry. So you have 4 choices, and it's up to Mexico to decide which of the 4 choices they're going to undertake and move forward. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Paris. Very interesting presentation and very interesting options. Obviously, I think we need to learn from your 185 years of experience and experience throughout the world on what's good and what's bad for Mexico, no? And I don't think for Mexico or for any of the Latin American countries, it's in their interest to make products more expensive or to have, ULM or what other product stamp that would only add cost and have require trade barriers with a lot of repercussions in the future. So today we need to look into the future in the way that we don't need to invent the wheel. We need to use mutual recognition and equivalence agreements with putting existing standards like ISAO, UL, FM, European Union, and avoid any substandards like CCC, which has invaded the world for 25% of the non-qualified approved products. No, so let's work together.
But China changed. China no longer has CCC requirements for fire protection products.
That's why we need your expertise.
They put it for quite a few years to make sure that manufacturers, they put a barrier to entry for other manufacturers. They brought up their industry. Last year, they took the requirement away. So they went back to where they were, okay?
So it's zero quality standards, international quality standards. And obviously, if you're going to invest a big amount of money in protection, you don't want to waste it with a product that it's not approved. It will be the wrong use of your money.
I totally agree.
Corners, no? So
I completely agree.
in Mexico, building regulations changed in 1985 because of a big earthquake that devastated the central part of Mexico and left around 3,000 victims. That made a change in regulations to reinforce structures in all buildings. As well, fire systems will be an integral part of buildings when we become aware of the tremendous dangers we face, as some of the advanced countries of the world have done. We learn from these countries with humility and do not seek to reinvent the wheel, as I say. The longer the society, the industry, the commerce, the associations and the policymakers delay, the greater the impact on the or the damages that fires will have in our lives. So Chris, NFPA, what will the future of fire protection industry, including the impact of NFPA codes and standards, do for Latin America and the rest of the world?
Thank you again, Carlos. As a global standards development organization, NFPA embraces new technology and digital solutions, but we often say that it's important that progress does not outpace safety. Moving forward, you will see digital systems and solutions addressed in more and more of our codes and standards. Ultimately, why? Because our standards are not stagnant, and they're updated on a regular basis to ensure that new technologies and new innovations can be applied and then utilized in whether it's Mexico or any other country that utilizes our standards, but it ensures that the fire protection benefits of the latest technologies and innovations can be applied. And this is a key element as to why NFPA codes and standards are used in so many areas around the globe, because they are up to date and anyone can participate in that. And I think you'll see here as I highlight some of the things that we're facing as global or technological advances in the standards, I think we'll see that. We know that the 2022, if you could go back to the title slide, please. We know that the 2022 edition of NFPA 13, Standard for the Installation of Sprinkler Systems, will likely contain language addressing the use of electrically activated sprinklers for the first time. I'm told that if a fire event occurs, the system will electronically activate sprinklers in a specific pattern around the fire based upon algorithms programmed into the releasing panel. The new technology ensures that only the sprinklers that will be effective in suppressing the fire will activate to limit both fire and water damage. NFPA 72 also comes into play since there are electronic components that heat detectors. Systems are connected to a releasing panel that looks a lot like a releasing panel for a pre-action system. It looks like a fire alarm control panel or sub-panel, but it fits into NFPA 13 in the same way that a specialty releasing panels do. On the water-based side, automated testing is heavily present in NFPA 25, but installation system standards such as NFPA 13, 14, 15, and 16 are catching up and adding allowances for installation of automatic testing systems and components, automated flow switch arrangements, and other testing equipment, including motorized valves capable of opening and closing remotely, cameras for observation, and auxiliary pumps for circulating water. Remote testing is also being addressed in NFPA 72. During this current development cycle, the Technical Committee on 72 added provisions for remote access to fire alarm and signaling systems. Can we please go to this slide after the cover with the infographic for remote inspections? NFPA 915 standard on remote inspections is in the early development stages, but even during normal times, AHJs or enforcers tend to have heavy inspection workloads. But with so many buildings shut down in recent months due to COVID, that burden has significantly increased. Remote video inspections offer an effective and efficient alternative for building inspectors. Task groups working on the 2023 National Electrical Code are looking hard at digital solutions such as packet energy transfer, the system that converts the typical 60-cycle power circuit into a digital signal and reconverts it at utilization. Why is this important? Because this technology is being used to power up the 5G equipment that is going to revolutionize how we communicate with digital devices. NEC task groups are also looking at emergency lighting using power over Ethernet or limited energy circuits. And the TC is vetting new requirements surrounding localized power mini-grids. IoT of electrical technologies and smart equipment allow for the collection of real-time data, which can then be used to preempt failures, schedule maintenance, provide safety for workers. This latter benefit is of interest to the 70B, NFPA 70B, and NFPA 70E stakeholders. And then, of course, there's the byproduct of all these digital solutions, the data that's captured and generated. The analytics from these systems will go a long way in making businesses more efficient and to reduce risk. As more and more fire protection systems are networked to building control systems, they're being designed or oversight or exposed to the internet. This connectivity can lead to cyber vulnerabilities and attack on fire protection systems. To date, a thorough understanding of fire protection cybersecurity issues has been lacking. So our research arm, the Fire Protection Research Foundation, is working to better understand vulnerabilities, the severity of consequences, and the awareness issues that exist within the fire protection community. When the research is released in January, it will inform the standards development process. But in the meantime, there are at least 16 NFPA standards currently addressing cybersecurity. One such code is NFPA 72, which has added guidance and requirements to address cybersecurity for equipment, software, firmware, tools, installation methods, as well as the physical security of and access to equipment, data pathways, testing, and maintenance. In fact, NFPA 72 now includes an entirely new guidelines for cybersecurity annex. And as you know, training and education is a big part of NFPA. So I hope you are taking note of a shift in our educational offerings lately. To help the fire protection community and others keep up to date on standards as well as best practices, our training and certification division has really worked overtime on new offerings. This year, we've introduced new online learning courses, life safety and fire protection system fundamentals, and NFPA 25 inspection, test, and maintenance of water-based fire protection systems. Perfect for workers who have been furloughed, working remotely, and engineering students and others that are looking to expand their understanding of building systems while in home quarantine. If you notice the slide that's on the screen, we've also launched learning pathway programs to help people prepare for important certification credentialing exams. Professionals looking to get ready for the Certified Fire Protection Specialist, CFPS, Certified Fire Inspector, CFI-1, and Certified Fire Plans Examiner, CFPE, can now customize their study approach to include individual online training modules or a full program with a more comprehensive educational content. We debuted our new NEC online training that is consistent with the current version of the code. One such way of learning is the NFPA 70 National Electrical Code online training series that emphasize safe and compliant electrical installation and design while helping students to locate, interpret, and apply requirements in their ever-evolving NEC. And it's in a little bit of a departure from our usual codes and standards-based education content. We've developed new topical training that teaches how different codes impact various systems. And the most exciting forward-thinking thing happening these days at NFPA is the digital transformation journey that has been underway to better meet the needs of stakeholders who increasingly want information, not just codes and standards, but insights and real-world solutions via any device at any time in order to solve a problem in real time. If you go to the next slide, please. We recently launched Nfpa Link, our new content on demand platform. It is fundamentally transforming the way we deliver our information and our stakeholders gaining insights. Right now, Nfpa Link includes the 4 most recent editions of the National Electrical Code and code-related content. Please go to our website and test drive Nfpa Link. Bear in mind, additional codes and resources will be integrated in the months ahead. At full development, Nfpa Link will deliver intuitive, seamless, situation and code-based information and ultimately change the way safety professionals access and apply best practices. So as you can see, our standards development process, our training, our education, and accessing NFPA codes and standards via Link is what the future of fire protection holds in store. Like all of you, NFPA embraces change and welcomes innovation. Our organization may be turning 125 years old next year, but we have no intention of slowing down or resting on our laurels. It is critical that safety and progress move in lockstep and that our association leads the charge. Can I please have the next slide? I want to thank you all for your time today, because we, NFPA, cannot do the work we do without professionals and practitioners like you who are continuing to learn each and every day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very, very important what NFPA is doing and how it is changing. Chris, all the elements are there for us to open our minds and to adapt and learn. And we need to do it from the best, the biggest, the persons that have been in this industry the longest, so we don't have to invent the wheel again. We can wait in Mexico or in Latin America for someone else to fix our problems. We must make our own decisions based on what other successful countries have done and what science has taught us in the international standards that are available for everybody free. And we all need to act to change our regulations in Latin America to make a safer continent and a safer world, because we are all in danger. Government regulation is the A of the alphabet for a safer world, as NFPA puts it very well in its ecosystem. This will bring challenges as well as opportunities as we work to protect people, properties, and business interruption. We can build a better tomorrow for our children and grandchildren, free of the dangers of fire. It's a small world. Let's work as one continent to protect it together. We're going to be trying to get the Day of Fire Protection or Fire Prevention in Mexico, and we would like to have it in the world. That will give us a symbol for everybody to fight the same cause, aligned and pushing all together in the same way. So thank you all for your participation in this Fire Protection Virtual Congress. It's been very, very interesting, and we have learned tremendous things in this hour and a half. We're finishing a little bit early. I don't know if you want to add up, any of you wants to add up anything in this panel, please welcome.
Carlos, I'd like to just say thank you for having us, and I would also invite everyone here to NFSA is going to hold a virtual conference that is free on December the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 2020. And so we invite you to participate in that. We'll showcase many of our members and our products, have one day of keynote speaking, have one day of product, and one day particularly geared for AHJ. So that's December 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And then certainly to the North American Fire Sprinkler Expo, which will happen, hopefully will happen May the 12th through the 14th of 2021 in Las Vegas. So that is where we have always partnered with our friends from around North America for the North America Fire Sprinkler Expo. So that's May 12th through the 14th. So look forward to seeing you there. And as you said, Carlos, there is no need to reinvent the wheel. You have a lot of good friends and colleagues here that are willing to help. So keep up the good work. And thank you to my colleagues for having me as a part here. It's an honor to be with this group.
Thank you very much, Shane. Thank you. Any other further comments to finalize?
Carlos,
yes.
Sorry, John Galt here. I'd echo Shane's comments. Appreciate the opportunity. Anything that brings people together, and I always find wherever I go in the world, sprinkler people are unique people. We're in the life-saving business. We have, I always say, I believe we have a higher calling because our business involves saving lives. If we can make a living at it, we can make some profit at it, it means we'll do it better and longer. So from our perspective, we're here to help too. And what tremendous resource Shane brings to the table for all of us. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Shane.
Carlos, this is Chris Dubay. I just want to again thank you. We have a saying that we often use with first responders in the fire service through NFPA. We say we go where you go, because we rely on other people to accomplish our mission. So again, thank you for the invite, and know that NFPA is here to be a partner, to support you in the work, to support the country in the work. Again, it is about that global mission of eliminating fire and loss of life and injury and damages due to fire and electrical hazards. So we remain here, and we're ready to support you the best we can. So thank you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I want to thank you, Carlos, as well as Victor and Amrasi. You and Victor know if you need anything from FM approvals, all you have to do is ask. So my closing remarks is it's great to see everyone. Stay healthy.
Thank you very much, and thank you again. And we invite you to 2 more days of very interesting different topics. They don't. Some of them are related to fire protection. Everything is high-level business talks, and these are tough times. I think we all can learn a little bit, and we want for you to participate until the end. We have very interesting people from different sectors and organizations. So you're welcome to continue participating in our virtual Congress. And as well, we wanted to invite you because our association from Colombia is having the 28th and 29th of October, it's virtual Congress. So we will have a continuation of this very interesting chat with them in Colombia, where we will have the leaders of the industry give us, of the fire protection industry, the sprinkler leaders of the industry, give us a message of how do they see the things, what the message of leadership that we all need at these difficult times. As well, we will continue with the Brazilian convention, which will take place from the 10th to the 13th of November. And there we'll have, it's an ecosystem. So it's not only, the solution is not only sprinklers. Yeah, it is the best solution. However, we'll have the alarm and detection heads of companies give us a message of how they see the future and what's the impact to the industry, as well as the special hazards. People, which are, some of them are common companies, but we all have different solutions for different situations. So it's very important for us to give to Latin America the resources so that we can make it safer. Thank you very much again for participating. I don't know, Victor, do you want to add anything else? I don't think so. So basically, sí, adelante, Victor. Sí.
No, just I want to thank you, all of you guys, because it's the first time that we have this leadership in one table. And we have more than 500 people connected. It's a tremendous successful. Thank you so much. And thank you, Carlos, Chris, Shane, John. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.